Church leaders need intentional development to help them discover their capacity.
When studying leadership, it can be easy to stereotype leaders with large numbers. If you're leading millennials, you're leading young leaders, is you have to be authentic. You have to be vulnerable. You got to be transparent. You got to be willing to be honest. They can see through your junk.
Welcome to the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast, where we talk about how to build, run, and keep a great team. I'm your host, Holly Tate, and on today's episode, William talks with Brad Lomenick. Brad built the Catalyst Conference from the ground up, and he's author of The Catalyst Leader in his new book, H3 Leadership. In this episode, William and Brad talk about leading millennials and his leadership mantra, be humble, stay hungry, and always hustle. Be sure to tweet your favorite leadership quote using the hashtag Vandercast, because this week we'll pick a winner and send you a free copy of Brad's new book. So be sure to tweet your favorite leadership quote using the hashtag Vandercast. And without further ado, here's William and Brad.
We're fortunate enough in our work doing search and consultation with churches to be around some of the biggest and best church leaders that there are. But I got to say, if there is a all-star Hall of Fame guy who's been around more great church leaders than anybody, it's you. Hosting Catalyst, you've gotten to be around the best and the brightest. And I'd just love to, ask you, have you seen any common denominators among the leaders that you've gotten to visit with and become friends with? When they're talking about building and running and keeping a team, are there common threads that come up that you've heard over the years?
Yeah, I mean, probably several. I can't name them all, but there's definitely a few that stand out for me. One is that the people that I've been around that I feel like have built great teams and continue to build great teams, they constantly are pushing the responsibility, the level of authority down the chain. And this is true when they start, and it's also true once they get to be really big. And a lot of us think, when we're starting an organization or starting a church, that's easier than it will be when you get a bit larger, and that's true. But there is this consistent and persistent approach among the leaders I watch and admire, who every level and every opportunity they hand off the decision making to the rest of the people around them. And as leaders, it's actually hard, and it's not normal. It doesn't come naturally, because as a leader, your natural response is, I'll decide that. I'll take care of it. I want to be the one that, the buck stops with me. And while that's important, you have to be willing to not only surround yourself with great people, but you have to be willing to hand off the decision-making and authority, responsibility, influence, impact to the people around you. And I've noticed that to be a consistent theme with the organizations that seem to be thriving, is when you talk to their staff, not to the point leader, but when you talk to the people around the point leader, and you ask them, hey, what is it like to work on your team? And, do you get to make decisions? And is so-and-so, whoever that point leader is, are they involved in everything? And the answer is no. And they're involved in a few things. They're involved in a few things that they can do really well. So that's one. Another one would be that there is a constant pursuit of excellence on that team. And, the willingness to always be a learner, the willingness to realize that we haven't arrived yet, the willingness to say, we may be on top of the mountain, but we're not going to act like it. We're going to always have a posture that says we're the hungry second and not the arrogant first. And that culture of constant improvement, I think, is incredibly important. And you watch the great sports teams. I mean, the great sports teams constantly have that kind of mentality, which is, man, we won the Super Bowl, but we want to win 2. And we won the Super Bowl again. We want to win 3. And to maintain that sense of being willing to jump back in the trenches and work hard and start over, and really be always constantly focused on raising the standard of excellence. I think that is a huge part the organizations I admire. So those would be two.
That's awesome, man. I'll just piggyback that because, boy, those are shared values for us. Working backwards, we have 9 core values. We actually, you get paid by how well you're living out those 9 values. I mean, that's how we do our annual reviews. And the very first one is constant improvement. And so, we're getting there, but we're trying to study. How is Titleist, you're a golfer, how has Titleist been the number 1 ball for this freaking long? I mean, can't somebody come up with a better golf ball? Really?
Right.
So, we're trying to figure that out. And then back up just a little farther and give a book to our listeners to read about this pushing decisions down. I'll actually give you 2 that we read, and it's required reading for new staff on our team. One is The Nordstrom Way. And Brad, you've probably read this book, but it's basically how has Nordstrom taken the excellence that they have, and they're a Seattle-based store. Seattle, I fly up there all the time. I don't even know if Seattle's in the United States. It's so far from everything, and they were able to spread a brand throughout, and it was based on awesome customer service that required people at the desk to be able to make expensive decisions without checking in with anybody. And my wife took a blouse that wasn't super expensive, but wasn't inexpensive to the dry cleaners. She bought it at Nordstrom. It got messed up by the dry cleaner. She took it to Nordstrom to say, "You have any suggestions for how to fix this? It's not your fault." And they said, "Yeah, we're going to give you a new one." I'm like, "Really? You don't have to check?" "Nope. Here you go. Thanks." I'm like, wow, yeah. It's pushing that decision all the way down. And one other book you want to read, which I just can't say enough good things about, is called The New Gold Standard. And it's written by the management team of the Ritz-Carlton and about driving culture and values into the organization. But one of the big ones is, and I'm going to get the dollar figure wrong, but everyone that works at a Ritz-Carlton has a daily expense allowance of, I think it's $3,000 or $4,000 per employee to just fix a problem, whatever it is. You need to give them 2 free nights. You need to buy a guest something. They have an allowance, and they're able to make those decisions without having to check in with, middle management or turn in a TPS report. So check out those 2 books and listen to Brad, because those are 2 really great principles.
Yeah, I was actually, William, I was just going to say Ritz-Carlton, in that motto of ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. Like they give such a huge amount of respect and credibility to the frontline people at Ritz-Carlton, and they basically tell them, you are ladies and gentlemen. You're not a housekeeper. You're not a front desk clerk. You're not a concierge. You're not a baggage handler. You're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And I love that they honor people on the team by giving them that sense of credibility, and not just the ability to deal with problems and create solutions, but actually giving them a huge sense of winning themselves, of, my job does matter. Like, I'm part of this team. It's not just the people that are at the top of the food chain that are actually like the ones who matter. It's us at the front of the line. So those are 2 great suggestions.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, if we write anything in content, whether it's a white paper or an article for Inc. or whatever, if I write anything on how to manage millennials, man, that jumps to the top of our web traffic every single time. Nobody knows how to manage them. They now are the largest generation in the U.S. workforce, and nobody's had a lot of practice at managing them. Well, Brad has had a ton of practice because everyone that worked for him when he was running Catalyst was a millennial, and they all had the same boots most of the time. It was kind of funny, but
right, yeah, that's true.
Any insights come to mind? I'm totally putting you on the spot, but anything come to mind about this new generation that's hit the workforce? There are probably pastors out there right now who have somebody that's a 30-something that ends every sentence with a question, and they talk like this, and they're a millennial. And so how do you manage this group?
Yeah, you know what? It's I think it's trial and error many times. I would start with this one, William. I think as a leader, the number one thing you have to do as a leader, if you're leading millennials, you're leading young leaders, is you have to be authentic. You have to be vulnerable. You got to be transparent. You got to be willing to be honest. They can see through your junk more than any other generation before. Their ability to the sirens to go off of fake is just off the chain, because they've grown up in such a fake world that everything that is fake, they're very aware of, and they're starving. I mean, they are so hungry, like 3 days without meal hungry for somebody who's real and somebody who will shoot straight, who is vulnerable, who's transparent, who is authentic. And so, we over the years at Catalyst especially, we would get the question, how can I be relevant to a 25-year-old? And I would always say that's the wrong question. Like, you don't need to be relevant to a 25-year-old. You need to be real to a 25-year-old. So if you're not leading from that place of realness, especially with the younger generation, then you're going to lose most of the time in respect and credibility, gaining influence, actually getting them to follow you. So that's a big one. The other one is you don't, the old days of hierarchy don't work with a 20-something today. In fact, they don't want to be part of a hierarchy. They want to be part of a team that is moving in the same direction. And so my advice is beside, not in front. Every single time, beside, not in front, beside, not in front. And there are times, obviously, leaders, I mean, the very essence of leadership is that you're in front. Like you're out in front of your team and you're taking risk and you're making decisions and you're casting vision. I get that. But the posture has to be that to the team, you're with them. You're not in the corner office with your feet up, sipping on spritzers. Like, you're in the trench with them. You're down with your hands in the dirt. You're digging. You've got dirt under your fingernails. You're next to them. And if you will take a posture that says, I'm with you, and there will be times that I have to be in front of you, but my default is I'm with you, that will go a long ways. The third one would be this. You have to be willing to let them jump in way sooner than you think they should. And this is one of the hardest ones for all of us who are older, because we grew up in an environment where it was, hey, stick around here, young buck. You got 5 years before you even get a chance. Or, to the generation before me, it was, you don't get a chance until you've reached a certain age. It's not even possible. The average 22-year-old walking into corporate America or into the church or into a nonprofit today, they really do think that they can do your job better than you can. And we all can argue whether that's true or not, but truth is based on perspective, and it's also based on a current perspective of reality. And most young 20-somethings think they can do your job. And I think that's actually really healthy. Nothing wrong with that. I think, there is some entitlement there, but I would give the advice of this: put them in to the game before you think they should be. Give them roles that that they'll probably fail at. Give them opportunities that are way beyond their capacity. Every single point you want to stretch their boundaries, and otherwise they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go start their own thing. They're going to find another team to be inspired by. And if you watch the companies right now that are leading the way on attracting and retaining millennials, they are doing that. They are putting people in the game really, really early. I love Life Church, and a lot of pastors and leaders listening to this will know of Life Church and Craig Rochelle and their team. And Craig says this all the time. He says, we give opportunities to our team and our leaders within the church way sooner than they should have. And there's been a lot of failures that have happened because of that. But there's also been a lot of innovation. The reason Life Church, I think, and I think Craig would say this, is known as one of the most innovative churches in the country is because they're so young. And young doesn't happen because you're telling young leaders to wait their turn. Young happens because you put them in. So I think you gotta be willing to do that. And there's a lot of 40 and 50 somethings and 60 somethings right now that are, they're sweating right now hearing this. But I think we have to be willing to do that, and way more than the generation did for us. That's the key on that. That's awesome. It reminds me. So we actually probably 3/4 of our office, of the 35 or 40 or so people here in Houston, probably 3/4 of them are under 30.
and above 15 if OSHA's listening. But but they that is consistent among, and they just keep, now that the flywheel's turning, they draw people like themselves to us. And one of the reasons, I'll ask them why, and they're like, will you let me do stuff before I'm qualified to do it? The very first hire I had, Ben Holmesley, who's our COO, he came in his first day. He didn't know what he was doing. We were on WordPress, right? It was forever ago. And I had just finished a run where I listened to Andy Stanley give a talk about hand off a task before a person's ready, they'll figure it out. And I said, hey, Ben, here's a podcast by Andy Stanley. He said, who's that? Which was kind of funny. And right. I said, I want you to listen to it and then write a blog post and post it. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. Oh, you know what? And I just literally lifted it right out of Andy's podcast, said, you'll figure it out. I'm sure you'll do great. And that's kind of how we roll. And they figure it out. So one thing.
They are, that's so true. And just to add this point to what you just said, William, like, this is the first generation that knows more than the generation before them.
Oh, wow, that's good.
In terms of knowledge, because this is the true knowledge generation. So, the old days, that if I was older, I was wiser. And I still probably am wiser if I'm older. But nowadays, younger means I have more information at my disposal quicker. And, it's the reason why when everybody gets an iPhone at Christmas in the family, or an iPad, who do you go to at the family gathering? You go to the teenager.
That's right.
You're not going to 55-year-old grandpa. You're going to the teenager. So that's a whole new reality in culture today, which is, again, I think is actually really exciting.
And what I've noticed is they'll transfer that principle of asking people before, for instance, and now if you are part of OSHA, you need to turn your podcast off for a second, because
right.
Our millennials that run our marketing actually asked my 12-year-old to come in and teach them Periscope and Snapchat so that we would know what to do. And it was just hilarious.
That's exactly right.
Hilarious to see them reaching down to somebody that doesn't even know how to drive a car to say, how do you use this new technology? So
and generations are actually the number of years between the technology gap and generations is shrinking. Yes. In the sense that what used to be the gap between 10 to 15 years is now the gap between 5 to 7. So just like you said, the 18-year-old will go to the 12-year-old now, just like me as a 40-year-old would go to a 25-year-old. So that gap is shrinking considerably because technology is advancing at such a rapid rate, which is, again, just a really interesting phenomenon that's happening within culture and within technology and within the way we interact with things around us.
Well, I could talk about this forever. And the guys who are sweating saying, what's a Periscope? Is that on a World War II sub? I mean, sorry, guys. And the projection I read yesterday was that we'll see more change in the next 10 years than we've seen in the last 100. I mean, it's not going to stop. So listeners, just lean into this. It's the most fun generation you'll ever work with if you'll give them the chance and really reach out to them. So,
yes.
Hey, Brad, I know you got a book coming out. I want to hear about that. Tell us why you wrote it and why we ought to be interested in it.
Yeah, so this is actually my second book. The first book I wrote was The Catalyst Leader, which was really kind of the story of Catalyst, and I think kind of a manifesto of the Catalyst movement. And this next book is called H3 Leadership, which stands for humble, hungry, and hustle. And those three pillars for me have been my leadership mantra really since I was in my early 20s. And, over the years, even of leading Catalyst, we would have a new crop of interns come in every year, and, they're young and wide-eyed and 22, 23, and they're ready to change the world. And they would sit in my office and we would have a conversation. And one of the questions they would always ask is, hey, Brad, if you have to boil it all down, when it comes to practical leadership, what's your answer? And I would always say Triple H, H3, humble, hungry, hustle. If you can establish those as your foundational pillars in your leadership, then you're going to go a long ways. And so this book really is it's a playbook. It's really a game plan on leadership, practical in the trenches. The whole idea behind it really was, not only is that my leadership mantra, but when I handed off Catalyst about a year and a half ago, I kind of had my own leadership crisis, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast. But the point of that was that I had to reestablish for me some leadership habits in my life, and my leadership was stale. There were some things about who I was as a leader that I really didn't like, and so out of that season of a couple of months of just reestablishing those habits, there's 20 habits that really emerged for me, and that's the way the book plays out, is these 3 pillars that then break down into 20 habits. And so, if you're looking for a leadership playbook, then I think this is a really practical book for any leader at any level. I really wrote it, William, for what I would say is my tribe, which is kind of that 25 to 40-year-old leader. If you're an older leader, it still applies and it's still great. But I really still have in mind that first half leader, and really the second quarter of the first half. Somebody who's still sort of figuring out, the systems and the processes and the things they're going to put in place for their leadership. But I think the real important thing for me that I learned, and I'm learning still, is that leadership is hard. And anybody who's led for a long time, they're shaking their head right now going, yes, I totally agree. And it doesn't get easier. I mean, there are parts of it that do, but the more you steward, the harder it gets. And so if it's hard work, then it has to be habitual work. And that's why the 20 habits for me are so important, is if I'm going to do something in life that is going to be difficult, I've got to put some habits in place. And I think leadership needs to be one of those. If we want to be great leaders, if we want to finish the race well, then we have to establish some habits in our leadership that will take us, to the finish line.
That's awesome. And for our listeners who don't know, Brad comes out of being mentored by John Maxwell. And I mean, I had the pleasure and honor of being mentored by him a little bit. Brad did a lot. And I can tell you he comes from good stock. So his leadership insights will almost be like a John Maxwell for the next gen. And John, if you're listening, sorry. But,
And we love you, John.
We do love you. And we love Margaret more, but we do love you. And you're going to want to pick that up. Holly's going to send you some links in the email that goes out to all of you who are regular listeners, and she'll be making some announcements about how you can get that book. And we've actually been able to secure a copy of the book. And if you'll tweet with #Vandercast your favorite leadership principle, we're going to pick a winner and hand that book out today. So tweet #Vandercast. We'll watch it for a week, and then we'll decide who the winner is and send it out. We might even get Brad to autograph that book for us. I don't know. I'm putting him on the spot, but I think
Come on.
All right, we can probably work it out. So
yeah, that'll make the value of the book go down like 90% if I've got my autograph in there, especially on eBay.
If you're like me, your mom is the biggest buyer of your books, so she might want your autograph. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, family love the autograph copies.
Hey, Brad, as we close out our time together, I want to ask you 3 set questions that we always kind of hit our guests up with on the spot. One is, tell us a book you're reading that we really need to know about, and you're not allowed to say the Bible or Good to Great.
Yeah, those are actually 2 of my favorite books. What I'm rereading, and this is a reread, so this is like a people have probably heard about this book, but I'm rereading it again, is Axiom by Bill Hybels. That is one of my favorite leadership books of all time, and I just love it. So that would be my Brad recommends is the book Axiom.
All right, so moving to the next hot topic, what app on your phone is getting tapped more than others right now?
Periscope, man. You mentioned it earlier. Like I'm still like doing my research, because I'm not a true early adopter, but I'm an early majority. So I'm still like figuring out my rhythm of Periscope, but I love Periscope. I'm all in.
I'm trying to figure out how to use it, but the interviews I do with people thinking about moving, that's generally pretty confidential. They, for whatever reason, they don't want to go on Periscope with me.
Yeah, well, and I tell you, I mean, Uber is also one of my favorites, and a lot of people will know Uber. But man, if you're a traveler like I am, Uber has become my new favorite best friend.
Oh, I've been with them for 7 years and just love them as a service. So, hey, last question. Make everybody feel a little more normal. Tell us a time you totally blew it on stage.
Gosh, I have so many. I'll give you this one. It takes a little longer to explain, but stick with me. So we were doing a Maxwell book tour about, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. And we were in Charlotte, and I don't remember the church, but it was a large African-American church. And there was 400 people at this breakfast, and I am just a complete moron. And I get up at the end, and I cannot remember the bishop's name who was there at that church and who was the senior pastor. But I got up and I called him by his first name.
Oh.
Which, as you know, is a no-no. And you would have thought that somebody hit, like the record scratch, in the room. It was one of those moments, and it was so quiet. And I had no idea what was happening. And, not only did I say it once, I think I said it like 3 times. And I kept thanking him, and I'm like, I'm looking at him in the front row, and so, I handed it off at that point, and I think he actually came up and prayed, and he was very gracious. Like he just looked at me sort of like, come on, young whippersnapper white boy, let's go. You got to figure this thing out. And after the official, thing was over, Maxwell, who I love and we both love, Maxwell came up to me and he said, Brad, I got to, give you a little hint here and just a little advice. There are certain environments where there is honor given, and the way you talk to a pastor in certain environments is you call them bishop, or you call them, bishop and their last name, or you call them pastor and their last name, but you don't use their first name. And I said, duly noted. I will never again make that mistake. So
I'll send you a video and document we use for new hires around here about how to know when to call somebody by what title, because it varies. It is all over the map with us. So that is awesome. Brad, thanks so much for joining us today. Make sure you check out Brad's new book, and we'll make sure you know how to do that when Holly tells you those pieces of information and what's coming up next week. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, William. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. You can connect with us on Twitter at VanderbloemenSG and hashtag your key takeaways with hashtag Vandercast. You can also receive more information about what we do here at Vanderbloemen Search Group and notes from today's podcast at vanderbloemen.com/podcast. See you next time.